would see our artists performing. So we've got to find places like that and use every available place we can, even non-traditional places, to expose the arts in proximity to where people live.
Thank you. For you owe it to people to explain how you're going to pay for it, and so we'll await that explanation in a number of areas. But I just was very happy with the fact that I talked about my own record, I talked about my own plans, and I talked about my commitment to the arts, which is something people, I think, well understand from actual things that I've done long before I was the mayor.
And in this debate, I talked about the relationship between having housing that people can afford and being able to grow our businesses and our arts and culture. We know that arts are a critical economic development tool in this city that generate over $11 billion in return annually to the city. But all of that falls apart if we are not building affordable housing. It all falls apart. Those businesses can't grow. Artists cannot afford to live here. Well, what's happened on Mr. Tory's watch? On Mr. Tory's watch, what's happened is we've seen this become the most expensive city in this country.
This city is undergoing drastic change. Ms. Keesmaat and Mr. Tory, with all due respect, do not deliver. They failed the City of Toronto on the Housing Opportunities Toronto plan, didn't even build half of the 10,000 units that were promised. So how can the people of the City of Toronto believe that 100,000 units are going to be built under the leadership of Ms. Keesmaat? I know, coming from an immigrant background, this is not just politics for us. This is how we live, and this is how we will protect the next generation and young people coming up in a city that is now 51% racialized and migrants.
So number one, direct investment in the arts. The numbers do matter. And again, it's an investment. It's not a cost. It makes good business sense to do it, so we shouldn't be arguing about it at all. We should just go ahead. Space for artists. Artists need space. We need artists. We don't have space for artists to perform, to create, to exhibit. So we need to make that happen, and we need to make sure artists can afford to live in the city. And the third place we need to invest is in transportation. Not just in the plans for the long term, but in short-term operations. We are underfunding the TTC. Artists and their audiences need to be able to afford to get around, and they need to be able to do so safely, reliably, and accessibly as well.
There are two things we didn't talk about today, and one is Toronto, as I said, is highly multicultural. There are 120 different countries represented in our city, and they, with themselves, they bring in arts and cultures here. But we have to be very careful that we don't lose out on the solid, indigenous, native history of arts that we have, and we have to put pressure behind that. That's number one. Number two is I've been looking at the stats, and we've been giving grants to a lot of artists, and they're normally under $15,000, right? And what's happening is hundreds of those grants are being given, but there's no common unifying thread. So at the end of it, there's no common big branding that is coming out. That is what the City of Toronto should represent. And that's something we should look at, to be able to unify all those millions of dollars that we're spending on our artists, to put us that one step ahead.